Shalom and hello, my name is Melissa from Ministries, and today I'm going to talk about sin and iniquity and what it looks like from the perspective of psychiatry and psychology connected to inner healing work, soul parts, and basically the deliverance ministry and how freedom actually kind of operates. Sin and iniquity is not what we thought it was, but then again, with a darkened heart, how would we have ever known? A lot of this stuff in this teaching today is very unpopular, okay? And I should put in a disclaimer. This is going to trigger you, okay? Just a warning, this will trigger you. And the reason why is because iniquity is a survival state in our mind, which means that we have created techniques, which is sin, by the way. Yes, we've created coping mechanisms, which is sin, to protect our survival traits that had to kick in because of iniquity, the false beliefs of iniquity we're born with, okay? And so we will fight for our iniquity. We will fight. People will fight to the death for this because in our mind, we believe we will die if we do not believe this. We will die if we go against this, okay? That's why I like to call it, we've been programmed, okay? Satan programmed us. And because of that, we believe good is evil and evil is good. And you're going to realize that everything is upside down. And that's this teaching that I'm doing today. I'm going to teach you that everything's upside down. And what you've been believing is the opposite. When it comes to trauma, the most traumatic thing that can ever happen to somebody is how you feel about that traumatic event. Handy hint. And, you know, a great example of that in the Bible would be how we created death. Adam created death because he sinned. Okay, he created it. Just remember that. Adam created death. Yeah, that's why we all die in Adam. God didn't create that. Adam did. And we would say that's the scariest thing, isn't it? When you think about it, what are you more scared of? Being in a spiritual place forever? It's supposed to be horrible. We know God and black's light and it's full of darkness and you're alone and it's for all eternity as well. We created that, by the way. So you're going to actually understand that the most traumatic thing you can go through is actually these horrible inner worlds we create inside our minds and we traumatize ourselves in. That is why it's traumatic. It's because of the inner worlds we create for ourselves. And they're horrible. Some of these places we make for ourselves to torture ourselves in because of our false beliefs coming from iniquity. It's quite horrific. You know, see, something about trauma is that when a traumatic thing happens, it lasts for a certain amount of time and then it's over. And that's where God is great. You know what I mean? He judges you and then it's finished. There's no more. He doesn't continue it on. He doesn't do that, no. But when it comes to our mind, we can torture ourselves forever in our mind. We can put ourselves in a horrible realm, like death, and leave ourselves there forever. So what is iniquity? So iniquity is basically I like to describe it as a veil. It's like a veil that goes over your heart, or like a covering that prevents you from seeing that you are the image of God. That's the way I like to describe it. At least that's what it seems to be in terms of how this operates in parts work with integrating and soul fragments and everything to do with dissociation. It's our inability to see that we are the image of God and perfect, and therefore we believe we are lacking something, and because of that lack that we perceive within ourselves, we go out of our way to try and receive that from other people. And what that ends up doing is it creates these false beliefs, they would refer to in psychology. Psychiatry tends to use the same kind of terminology, but it's this idea of a false belief, this coping mechanism that we take on in order to survive this false belief that we have of ourselves primarily. And that is what I would call from the Bible iniquity. So iniquity is basically the Bible would describe it as how the devil deceived the whole entire world. So it's this veil, this covering that goes on your heart that prevents you from seeing truth, basically. And instead you see the lie, which is the deception. And because you believe this lie so thoroughly, so believe this lie, you end up sinning in order to cope with that. And that's the whole false beliefs and all these coping mechanisms. So what is sin? So sin basically is a coping mechanism. It's also survival kind of coping mechanism in order to survive some sort of perceived threat, whatever that is. And that would be this veil that's on your heart of the breaking of the Ten Commandments. You believed as a child, you believed for whatever reason that you were not enough the way you are, and you needed something more than what you were in order to survive. And that's where these false beliefs come from. And that's where sin comes from, which is the coping mechanism. So you believe this false belief, which is the deception from Satan, from the devil. Yes, that's his deception. You believed you weren't enough. You needed something more. Remember how I've said before, more is always the devil. It's always more. It's never less. It's more, more, more. He always does that. So if you always hear more, you probably don't want it. You probably want less, because that's usually the temptation. You know, if you want to see the tempter coming, look for the more. So he makes out that you need more than what you are. And he says, it's okay. I have a solution. It's called sin. You just take on this sin coping mechanism and your problem will be resolved. And as a kid, as a soul part who's in survival state, he thinks, I will die without whatever that is, right? They are happy to take on that coping mechanism. And, you know, some of those coping mechanisms can be things like people with eating disorders. Yes, people with eating disorders comes from this stuff. So as a child, they took on this coping mechanism for their, sadness, their grief, and it was to eat at that time or drink that sugary drink or whatever it was. And so they've grown up as an adult now. And so every time they get into that sad state, that grief state, that anxiety, whatever it was, fear, they will rush to the fridge, go get their favorite cake and eat that food or chocolate or whatever it is, right? To cope with whatever that painful thing maybe, right? And this is an example of this was come from childhood. This was a childhood wound. So basically, Satan comes along. He fragments parts of your soul, right? So he comes along. He causes you to believe this inability that you have from this veil from your ancestors, and then all of a sudden you decide to take on this coping mechanism. You fragment yourself. You dissociate yourself, and that little soul part lives in that inner world, which creates a new veil. So just remember with these veils as well, like I just described here, you've got the iniquity veil. Then you're creating another veil on top of that, which is your soul part veil. And then if you keep living your life and you sinned again, and then you did another one when you're 15, there's another veil. You've got so many of these veils at the end. You have so many of them that you literally become, like the Bible says, spiritually blind. This is where spiritual blindness comes from. It's also why you get deaf. You get so many of these veils of iniquity curses. And there's different versions as well. If you go into understanding the Hebrew, there is sin, then there is iniquity, there is transgression, and then there's wickedness. And that in itself is a Bible study. Okay, there's 4 different types to understand sin that you're going to have to go research. So yeah, but in the end, wickedness is basically where you believe good is evil. Transgression is when you it's like backstabbing. It's like this idea of backstabbing somebody. Avon is crookedness, when you're walking in crookedness, which is, that's iniquity. And sin is basically when you miss the mark. You don't quite follow God's system on how you're supposed to do things. So you're not quite meeting righteousness state, so to speak. So the age of accountability. So it seems that the age of accountability is one of the things you need to consider when it comes down to sin, especially for children, okay? So the story goes is that when you are under the age of 12 for a girl and you're under the age of 13 for a boy, you come under the, basically the blessings and the curses of your forefathers. And that means that your mother and your father, if they've got only open doors to sin, the child will be allowed to be tempted from the stage they're in the womb, by the way. So the day they're conceived, they're allowed to be tempted up to that age. Basically, these spirits can start to harass babies in the womb starting from there, and then they work their way up until the age of accountability, 12, 13, depending on boy or girl. And then after that, they will make another covenant with the child. So first they'll make a covenant with them before 12, and then they'll make another one after 12 and 13. They'll make their next covenant, and then they can seal the deal, and then the generational iniquity can continue on the bloodline. And that's the basics of how generational iniquity works. Now, in terms of stock standard sins and what sins are our parents actually committing that's causing this stuff, is basically it's the breaking of the 10 Commandments. And from what God has shown me, every human has broken the 10 Commandments. There has not been one person that hasn't done that except for Yeshua. Okay, so that's something to consider. Breaking the 10 Commandments doesn't look like what you think it does. We have this idea that you have to worship it in a statue. We have this idea that you have to do some idolatry thing with some other god. We assume that you have to actually steal something, like take somebody's item. Actually, sin is smaller than that. From what God has shown me, it's all about this idea of the body, soul, and spirit. So the nefesh. Now, in terms of the nefesh, a great example of it is the start of the Bible. In Genesis, there's a story about Adam, Eve, and Satan in the garden. And you'll notice that this body, soul, spirit thing is consistent throughout the Bible. It's everywhere, this nefesh idea. And it's also, to understand the body, soul, and spirit is to understand the spirit realm. So it's a really important thing that you need to consider whenever you try to understand things like sin and iniquity. Okay? You need to understand the body, soul, and the spirit. So what happens basically is that, remember, the Garden of Eden is a great example of how sin and iniquity works, all right? Satan came along and he questioned Eve. And then Eve decided to sin and she gave it to Adam. And then Adam agreed with it and mankind was cursed, okay? Notice that trend. Satan was the spirit that came and he tempted the soul, which was Eve. And then Eve in the soul, in her mind, told Adam, and Adam physically did it. And voila, you've got iniquity on mankind. This is a very interesting concept when you consider the spirit realm. If you think of Satan as the spirit of a man, Eve as the soul of a man, and Adam as the physical body of a man, together they make one person, they make a nefesh, and you notice how we're from the spirit into the soul and into the body. And that is pretty much how you could say demonization works. That's how spiritual bondage works. That's how sin is conceived. Okay, that's how all this stuff manifests, how sin operates, how people orchestrate sin, where it comes from. It starts in the spirit realm. The temptation's always in the spirit, and then it goes into the soul, which is the mind. So the spirit is first, it starts in the heart. Let's word it a different way. It starts in your heart, it goes into your mind, the heart, which was Satan, and then it goes into the mind, which was Eve, and then it goes into the body, which was Adam. And then it curses all of mankind, because all die in Adam. Very interesting stuff. So if you can understand that concept, all right, you're going to start to understand iniquity. So each time one of these sins has been added to this equation, and I would suggest now, based on from the days of Adam till we are today, we have heaps of sin all over us. And as you can tell, it starts off, like I said to you before, it starts off with Satan tempting, starts with Eve, the thoughts in your mind, and then it goes into the body. And this is why God says, keep your thoughts captive to the obedience of Jesus Christ. Because if you don't keep your thoughts captive, Satan's going to tempt you. You're going to say yes to the temptation, and then it's going to physically manifest in your body. You'll notice as well, when it comes to taking your thoughts captive, we can't do that because of the darkness in our hearts. We have so much darkness in our hearts. We don't hear the thoughts. We don't hear the temptation of Satan. We're not hearing it. That's right. We're just instead doing it, thinking that's what we want to do, with no clue that we actually got tempted. We didn't even see it. We're not observant of it at all. So yeah, that's another part of the confusion, so to speak. This covering that's on our heart that's preventing us from seeing the truth, where does that come from? It comes from our ancestors. It comes from the fact that our ancestors broke the 10 Commandments, and because of the age of accountability, which is from a child up to the age of 12 years old for a girl and up to the age of 13, the sins of our forefathers are allowed to pass on to the children. And what that means in God's eyes, because he doesn't actually curse the children, he doesn't do that. God allows Satan to tempt them at that age. And if they say yes to the temptation, just like Eve did in the Garden of Eden, yes, that's right. Think of Satan coming to a little child instead of Eve now, tempting a little child in the soul as well, in their thoughts. That's how he does it. Does it in your thoughts, in the soul realm. So he does it in your mind. And if you say yes, it will come out into the physical body. That's how this works. And you've agreed to a sin. And then he gets you to break the 10 Commandments before you're 12 or 13, however that is for you. And then as soon as you get old enough, after the 12 and 13 age, and you come into the age of accountability, he comes again and he gets you to make another agreement with him. That's what he does, okay? And now he can pass that temptation onto your children when you have kids. Yes, and the cycle will continue. That's how he deceives the whole entire world. That's how iniquity operates. Some of the interesting things you need to consider when you start to understand iniquity and this veil that's on your heart that makes you believe this lie and in turn causes you to sin. It makes you wonder where that veil came from when you were born. And what is that? I mean, especially when you understand that these veils come from soul parts. Okay, so you're a little child, you're not dissociated yet, you've got no soul fragments created. All right, just imagine that for a moment. Right, you're born into the world, you've got the open doors of your forefathers because your parents broke the 10 commandments, so Satan can come around and tempt you, but you have that veil on your heart still. Where'd that veil come from? I mean, you didn't get dissociated, so whose veils do you have? This is what we would call generational iniquity. And as you can tell, this is massively connected to DNA. Yes, DNA. What do I mean by that? We take the DNA of 50% of our parents, one from our mother, one from our father, right? And we take that into us. And usually as well, like I'm a female, so I took the female line of my father, for example, right? And if you're a male, you'd take the male line of your mother, etc., right? And so you take that and that becomes your genetics, right? We call this is your DNA, this is your ancestry, and when you have children, it will pass on the same way, etc. Now, what has this got to do with dissociation? Truckloads. You take the curses of your father's line and the curses of your mother's line, and you put that on you, and this becomes your generational iniquity. And what that physically looks like is veils on your heart from your father's line and your mother's line, which creates what we would call today your personality. Yes, your personality is created from these curses, from these veils, from the soul parts of your ancestors. The interesting thing about this is that the idea of a familiar spirit, yes, a familiar spirit is a spirit of your ancestry. And usually they're hybrids as well. So that's very interesting. So this idea of this veil on your heart is coming from soul parts who are fragmented of your ancestors. And that's where the temptation comes from in infancy. That's what generational iniquity is. Fascinating, isn't it? So sin blinds you. So basically what happens is when you soul fragment and your parts dissociate, they put these veils on your heart, you're literally blinded from truth. Okay, you start to believe the lie. You literally have a part of your heart goes into this realm, which is a lie, and you start to project it onto everything. You project it on the people, your world, everything you do throughout your whole entire life until you actually resolve that wound, whatever it was, break that agreement, whatever delusion you had there, take that veil off your heart, and you can actually see people for the first time. You can see yourself for the first time, and you can actually, literally, your heart can understand for the first time. You'll realize though, because of this agreement to sin, right, this agreement to iniquity, whatever that was in your life, right, you'll realize that from there, that's where demonization comes from. That's where all types of spiritual warfare comes from. That's where sleepless nights come from, night terrors, all types of sicknesses, diseases, and even death all comes from this soul fragments being created, this dissociation realms, these realms of dissociation. And depending on the open doors you have will depend on the severity of that bondage, so to speak. You could have something really mild, like something really small, sin agreement from childhood. But as if it keeps going over your whole entire life and you keep on opening doors and portals and sin doors because, you know, the sin just ramped up and became something real big and nasty as you got older. As soon as you come out of that sin agreement, you repent, the demons will come out instantly. But the key is you need to learn how to repent. You need to learn how to see your sin in your life and choose to turn from it and no longer participate in that anymore. And when it comes down to these survival and coping mechanisms, it's very hard to turn from something that you believe that if you don't do it, you will die. And that's something that's very interesting about iniquity. Iniquity gives you this false belief that if you don't do it, you will not be alive. I'll give you an example. I had a belief that my mother didn't love me. Okay. I had a belief that my mum didn't love me. And I believed that if she loved me, then everything would be good, right? So all I needed was my mother to love me. Okay, that was it. I believe she didn't love me. And the reason why was because she didn't hug me, basically. She didn't hug me enough. She didn't give me physical affection. All right. So I believed she didn't love me because of that. Now, I realized that when I went into that trauma from that childhood experience, which I'm not exactly sure how young I was, but I would say quite young, just based on the way I was thinking. I realized that my mother, that didn't physically give me any love, I realized when I went into that she did love me. When I actually looked at the moment again, questioned it again, I realized she did love me. She just didn't give me hugs, that's all. She had heaps of ways she showed me she loved me. It just wasn't through a hug. So in the end, I had this false belief that my mother didn't love me because she didn't hug me, right? And really, she did love me. She just didn't show it through hugs. And in turn, I had made a judgment against her, and I was very angry with her and aggressive with her, and I was attacking her. And that's the sin, by the way. That's the sin. That's me judging my mother. Notice that. I was judging my mother for her lack of loving me the way I declared she needed to love me, right? Now, this is the part that, in terms of how this stuff works when it comes to iniquity and sin. So what the veil was, the veil of iniquity was my inability to see that my mother loved me. That's what it was, okay? I couldn't see it. Why couldn't I see it? The answer is because I didn't love myself. So I believed I needed my mother to love me the way that I didn't know how to love myself. And if she couldn't love me that way, I assumed she didn't love me. And I went looking for somebody else, yes, somebody else, to love me in the way that I needed to be loved because I didn't know how to love myself that way. Yeah, that's what this looks like, okay? So I went looking for that. Now, in psychology, they would say that that was a need, that I needed to be loved. And then if I didn't receive that from my mother, they would say that she's neglecting her child. I would totally disagree with that. I'm very blessed. I've done inner healing work on my family too. I have discovered that my mother has trauma wounds, physical trauma wounds, which causes her to be disconnected, dissociated from her physical body because of these horrible things she's physically experienced. So the reason why my mother didn't hug me was because of her trauma. That's right, her trauma wounds, right? And it wasn't because she didn't love me. It was because she was disconnected from her physical body because of her trauma. So now, all of a sudden, you've got this girl, me, who believes this lie that my mother doesn't love me, attacking somebody who's already been through trauma. Do you see that? See where I'm going with this? She's been through so much trauma already, and I'm attacking her more. I mean, ouch. The truth will set you free. Now, do I want to attack my mother the next time she doesn't give me love the way I want her to give it to me? I definitely do not want to do that. No way. If anything, I'm going to go and love my mother 10 times more because of what she's been through. And this is an example of how your whole entire world is going to be turned upside down when you start to understand soul parts and soul fragmentation, okay? Because that was the truth. The truth was my mother had gone through that horrible thing. She wasn't able to give me love at that time in that particular way because of her trauma. And I, in turn, believed the lie of Satan that meant she didn't love me. And why did I believe that? Because I had a veil on my heart where I couldn't love myself that way. So I went into that thought. Went from there and I said, okay, I'm going to love myself now. So I went and decided to love myself. And then I hit into the next brick wall. Okay. The next sin agreement. The devil, he's done a lot. He's done a lot on mankind. So the next one was, I believed I need to love myself to make myself feel better. So I went into that, right? I need to love myself. Yeah. Yeah. I realized I didn't need that. I thought I did, but no, didn't need that either. What I actually wanted was I wanted to be honest with myself. I wanted to be truthful. I wanted to actually stop lying to myself that things were okay because they weren't. So what I'm trying to say here is that when you do this work, you're going to realize what you believe is true is not true. Okay? And when you take the veil off your eyes, you're going to see, like for me, I saw my mother for the first time. I saw, instead of somebody I was attacking, it was somebody that was in a lot of pain that needed someone to love them. See, the devil, he takes that and he turns it around. He makes you think that they don't love you, but really it's you don't love them. It's the other way around. That's what these veils do. They make you think it's them, but it's not. It's actually you. So if you feel like you need to attack somebody, right? You need to hurt someone. I'm going to tell you how this works. You're hurting yourself, okay, in that moment. whatever that is, but you are hurting yourself in that moment and you need to stop. And if you hurt me, if you lash out and hurt me, you're really doing it because you want to hurt yourself. And that's what sin is. It's getting confused between others and you and hurting others as a reflection of you hurting yourself. So in that moment, you're hurting yourself somewhere. What I have found is that we don't need love from people. I found that to be true, at least for myself, over and over again. I don't need love for people. I actually don't even need love from myself. What I have learned from integrating and doing soul part work on myself, I have discovered that I am love. So I don't need love. I am love. I make love. That's what I am. I was created to be love. And I would suggest every human being is the same. We are love. Okay? So there's none of this, I need someone to love me, and if I don't get that, I will die, all these horrible things that will happen to me. No, that's Satan. He's the one lying to you again, and he'll tell you you need to give yourself love. No, you don't. You just are love. So you can't not give yourself love. That's what you are. Okay? It's just how it works. You just are love. It's like saying to a cat, don't be a cat. The cat cannot be a cat. It's a cat. That's what it does. Cat's going to be a cat, okay? Just like a dog's going to be a dog. Elephant's going to be an elephant. That's what God created him to be. A tree's going to be a tree. A flower's going to be a flower, okay? And when you tell a flower not to be a flower, it can't help but be a flower. Now, you can put a veil on a flower and make the flower not believe it's a flower. Sure, that's what Satan did. That's what iniquity is, okay? You can put a veil on a human and tell them they're not love, okay? And that's the image of God, by the way. You can tell the human you're not love. You can make them think they need to get it from other people, and that's why we sin. That's what Satan does. That's what iniquity is, okay? But when you break down those sin doors, you actually realize you are love. And you can't not be love. That's what you're created to be. That's who you are. That is what you are. You are love. Okay? Handy hint. For some people, this can take a lot of integrating to understand that. That's tough. That's very tough to understand that. Like, it sounds like a wonderful concept. It sounds beautiful. And it does fly in the face of psychology, because I've just told you that you don't need love. And they're going to say, but wait, we have experiments with babies that died because they didn't get love from their parents and their caregivers. Of course, you have to understand with this stuff, the devil doesn't half do things, okay? These veils are real, okay? They're so believable that you will die without experiencing whatever that is that you believe in, okay? And that's why people fight for this. That's why people kill people over it. That's why there's wars in the world. This is why people sin, even if they don't want to. They do it because they think they have no other choice. They so believe that lie. The veil is so thick on their heart. There's got so many veils. They can't see another way. Okay? That's what this is coming from. All right? And that's why God said the devil deceived the whole world. So how many people got missed? No one. Remember that. No one got missed. Everyone got deceived.